we talk about the hardship here, um, and kind of the resulting implications of poverty. So one of the things we really want folks to know and kind of understand is what that experience of poverty is about, because it's not just lack of money. It's really a greater lack of resources in general, right? And that hardship, that can actually trigger disabilities in and of itself, right? We know that the relationship between poverty and disability and health is actually cyclical. The research bears that out, right? And we know that it can trigger or be a catalyst for secondary conditions or emergent disability. So if you are living in a place where you don't have the resources necessarily to get access to good and healthy food, right? Or, you're going to the store and you look at the produce section and it's $4.99 for a pound of grapes, but it's, $1.99 for that family size bag of Doritos. What are you going to do? What are you going to purchase? Because what's ultimately going to last longer, right? So those are the types of decisions and things that folks can be forced into making, right? And in that sense, if you don't have access to, preventative care and you don't have access to healthy food, that can create a disability, right? Like maybe that is an instigation or instigates, diabetes or something along those lines. We also know, for example, like just from this little exercise that we did, that it creates anxiety, it creates stress, that can lead to depression. So there's a mental tax that comes with it. And we know, as well, that there's a strong correlation between financial stress and like poor physical and mental health, because you notice I talked about immediately, my heart rate started to increase, right? Like think about too, it can cause like ulcers, right? Like that type of stress, it can cause headaches. So we know that folks that are experiencing this level of stress, particularly, this larger lack of resources, it creates a lot of stress. Can I go to the next slide? So what we wanted to talk a little bit about then is actually the science of scarcity. So this whole concept of not having enough resources and being forced to make these decisions and or problem solve, right? Constantly, it leads to something called the science of scarcity. So there was a longitudinal interdisciplinary study that looked at the relationship specifically between scarcity and someone's mental capacity. And ultimately what it showed is that scarcity, so not having enough, access to all of the things that you need access to, right? That actually creates this distraction that takes your time, it takes your attention, it takes money, and it can lead to a sense of depletion, which doesn't allow for you to be engaged. So this is something in particular too, to really think about for our young folks, if their family is experiencing poverty, like really thinking about the fact that, a lot of times that leaves their parents in a situation or their guardians in a situation where they're depleted, right? And they don't have necessarily the emotional bandwidth to do all of that interaction and that follow-up. So, a lot of times I think, inadvertently, we tend to think that, and I know that I've certainly been guilty of this over my career, like, oh, that family's uninterested. They're not engaged, right? They're unengaged. That's a way that we've talked about families before. But, one of the things we really wanted to point out, and we were hoping that Playing Spent kind of helps you think about, is the fact that, with that stress, comes this, scarcity or this depletion that doesn't leave a lot in the tank, right? So Betty Ray opened up today. Betty opened up talking about, the languishing, right, of the pandemic. And we all talked about, where are we at today? Are we a 5 or are we a 3 or are we a 1? Guess what? I didn't see any 5s, right? So, I think that just in some experience, like us accessing our own empathy relative to what we've experienced in the pandemic, and then, basically compound that multiple times over. And that can start to give folks a sense of what that experience of poverty is like. So depletion often results in poor decision-making. Well, y'all think about it, right? If you are constantly in a situation where you are trying to manage resources and solve problems for those resources that you do not have, what does that do? That takes away your ability to think about the future, doesn't it? Right? Like if you are stuck in the here and now because you're constantly managing or trying to problem solve what you don't have, that means that your ability to future plan it's not there. And so that makes a big difference. And if you think about, the way our education systems, developed, and our social services systems, what are they predicated on, right? Like systems of long-term planning and achievement. So when you're like, a lot of ways, like our systems essentially are asking for folks and, preparing young folks to do all of this. But if they don't necessarily have that background or that space because of the, scarcity that they're experiencing, that's something that we have to keep in mind. So the key findings of that study are that, poverty depletes parents' cognitive resources. Persons experiencing poverty are at greater risk for depression and anxiety, which we mentioned already, that mental tax, right? Depression and or distractions often lead to emotional withdrawal, which means that the family's not going to be characterized with the love and support that we know that young folks need, and instead is often characterized by, neglect or potentially conflict. All right. We know that scarcity is potentially correlated with impulsive behavior, poor academic performance, and poor financial decision making. So when we see some of these instances where these young folks may be struggling with some of these things, or we're seeing some of these, some of this activity or this behavior, it might be this should actually be a catalyst for us to stop and think and go, what's going on here? Is there something deeper here? Is this, maybe the result of this young person is experiencing the stress of poverty? And what do we need to do, or how can we better support them in that sense? We want policies and programs that consider scarcity-induced behavior. So really, it's about redesigning the cockpit, not necessarily looking at the pilot. And Raquam, I think we're off to you. Next slide. Yeah.
All right, so school and social mobility. Schools represent one of the most important channels of vertical circulation and social promotion, but only a few succeed in climbing up into its upper strata. In a democratic society, the school system functions as a social elevator, moving from the very bottom of society to the top. So what is social mobility? Social mobility is the movement of individuals, families, households, or other categories of people within or between social strata and society. It is a change in social status relative to one's current social location or space within a given society. So when individuals are unhappy with their current social positions, for example, their job, their income, educational level, they seek social mobility. We can see this from the students and families we serve. There are two types of mobility. You have horizontal and vertical mobility. Horizontal mobility is the transition of an individual from one social group to another situated on the same level. Vertical mobility is the transition of an individual from one social stratum to another. Vertical social mobility can be categorized as either social climbing, which is moving up the social ladder, or social sinking, which is moving down the social ladder. So we think about schools and its function as a testing, selecting, and distributing agency. School controls the individual's channel of vertical circulation and simultaneously acts as a sieve in society, allowing some to go up, keeping others in lower strata, and also school tests individuals with respect to their suitableness for the performance of a definite social function. It selects individuals for a definite social position. And it also distributes the members of society among different social strata towards their own promotion or degradation. The channel role of school continues to strengthen as it takes functions previously performed by the church, family, and other organizations. So when we think about our families, although families give the first test and influence on students' general qualities typically necessary for successful performance of many functions in society, such as their general intelligence, health, social character. To some degree, students are retested and reconsidered by schools and educators. Students spend a great deal of their lifetime, beginning in kindergarten and sometimes pre-K, in the hands of educational institutions. Therefore, the family cannot play an exclusive role in shaping children in society. Due to the time frame that students spend in school, the family loses its hereditary as well as its exclusive educational value. The family also loses its exclusive importance as a foundation for an evaluation and social placement of their children. The school essentially is the next agency which retests the decisions of a family and very often and very decisively changes them. So what does this have to do with us? Wisconsin Public Schools is a part of a national education system that impacts the placement of students in society. Due to the impact that schools and educators have on the outcomes of students, it is important that we begin to unpack our assumptions in order to increase the positive outcomes of our students and communities. Pass